absolutely don't feel ashamed if you're considering leaving math. It's not something to be ashamed of. So this is a version of the fear that everyone encounters when they leave college. Most people, it's just deferred by about 10 years. Universities started 800 years ago as basically religious training centers, and one thing led to another, and here we are on mathsjobs.org. Well, I still think of myself as a mathematician. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I do.
Sure you are. Welcome to Math Life Balance. Today our guest is Saul Glasman, who used to work in homotopy theory and K-theory and now works as a software engineer. Welcome, Saul, and thanks a lot for agreeing to give an interview.
Thanks for the invitation.
So in the beginning, I ask everyone to tell what brought them into math.
For me, for a very long time, it just felt like the natural trajectory of my life. So I was definitely good with numbers from a very young age. I was also into music, and I thought for a while I might want to pursue that as a career when I was very young. But in my mid-teens, I started doing well in high school math competitions. And then I was just really carried along by that momentum from then on. So I ended up doing the International Math Olympiad when I was 16 and 17. That was my ticket to study math at Cambridge University. And at that point, I loved it. And there was nothing else for me. I was, as soon as I discovered what there was out there behind, after the kind of math you learn at school, I was really in love with it. And I didn't think of doing anything else for a long time.
And then what changed after a long time?
What changed after a long time, to cut a long story short, is the realities of the academic profession. So
you don't have to cut the long story.
No, I'm not going to cut it short. That was just a one-sentence distillation. The way I like to put this now, which sounds more negative than maybe I mean it to be, is that academia is a pyramid scheme. The fact is that every faculty member at a research university is expected to train a number of grad students during their professional career, right? On the low end, maybe as a professor during your career, you'll train 3 or 4 grad students. That's not many, and it goes all the way up to Peter May, who has probably had 100 or so. So that's, to state the obvious, that's far above the replacement rate. Obviously, even in the best possible world where there's reasonable growth in the number of academic positions, not all of those people are going to get academic positions, and not all of them hope to, but most of them do. So this doesn't bother people who are in the system and don't yet have tenure as much as it should, because everyone has a story to tell themselves about how they are going to be one of the people who get to the top of the pyramid, and they believe that story. And I'm certainly not excluding myself, but considerations not immediately related to career began to come into my life. I got married. My wife was also in academia for a while, and we weren't able to live together as long as I was moving from place to place for postdocs every couple of years, because she had her own career demands. And I realized that at some point you have to stop waiting for something that may or may not happen in a few years' time to start living your life, and just start living your life. So that was really what precipitated the change. That, and I started to challenge the story I told myself and became less certain that I was going to succeed in becoming a full professor at an institution in a place I actually wanted to live, because that's another thing. I'm quite fussy about where I want to live. I'm an urban person, and I don't think I could be happy living in a small college town in the Midwestern US, even if I had my dream job. And of course, that's the best available for a lot of people, even if you're frankly at or near the top of your field.
That's interesting that you said that you think postdocs believe they will get a job, because from what I see, most postdocs are very much concerned with perspectives of not getting a job, and it's a huge pressure. And I think many people do leave academia as a postdocs because they're afraid that in the future they will not get a job.
Right, exactly. So the postdoc stage is when it starts to crumble, and maybe late in grad school, because it's when you actually get on the job market and see what that job market is like. The dreams for the future don't survive first contact with math jobs. It's really a harsh awakening.
I imagine it was a hard decision for you, despite the objective factors that you listed. So how did you make peace with this decision? How long did it take you to make up your mind?
It was something that especially me and my wife had been talking about for a long time. And I don't know how much I talked to my colleagues in math about it, but I think it was at least a little. I'm having difficulty remembering why things suddenly crystallized, but at the end of my second year as a postdoc at the University of Minnesota, I was starting to look at math jobs again for my next round of job applications, and it just suddenly felt very clear. It wasn't going to be practical for my wife to find a job in Minneapolis and move there, especially for just 1 year. I guess I wanted to start actively making plans for my own life rather than being at the mercy of the job market. That's some version of how I made up my mind. I don't know if myself at the time would have put it that way, but you also asked how long did it take you to make peace with it? Well, I don't know if I have made peace with it. It's I don't know. It's not really something that you can easily make peace with when you have a quite detailed path in mind for your career and it kind of unravels over a period of a few years. From basically my teens, I was on the track, right? I was on the academic track, and I knew basically what that track looked like. And for a period of maybe 10 or 15 years, I had absolute confidence that I would stay on that track. And then it didn't turn out to be the case. So that kind of shakes you.
Yeah, so I'm impressed by how you get to deal with it. And I was always, do I want to say it? I always thought it must be very scary to leave this track of many years, as you're saying. And so I wonder, are there any thoughts or something that helps to deal with it, or?
Yeah, so first you said it's scary, and it's kind of worse than that because there are two fears, right? There's the fear of leaving the thing you love behind, and the fear of not being able to find something else. And those are two very distinct fears, and they both need to be tackled in different ways. But sorry, what was your actual question?
Oh, please talk more about how you dealt with these two fears.
So I think, you know, the fear of losing something you love. I still love math. I still particularly love my old field, homotopy theory, and the way I think about that is I haven't lost it. I have something which very few people in the world have, which is the ability to understand that field, the ability to look at new papers coming out in that field and keep track of recent developments and, you know, still feel at least like a spectator to where things are going. And that's definitely not a full-time job. That's very far from it. So that's something that you can do as really a minor hobby, and it can be very gratifying. I think, you know, I think of that as something permanent and extremely valuable that I gained from being in math, even though it's probably only valuable to me now rather than valuable to anyone else who might have had the contributions that I would have had. It's still very valuable. I think the fear of not being able to find something else is, in some ways, it's scarier because it's more immediate. It threatens your livelihood. And it can last for a long time. For me, I was lucky. It took me about 3 months after I left math to find a job in software engineering. It's a job I still have. It turned out to be a good job that I like. I could easily imagine that it might have taken longer. It was kind of a fluke that I got this job when I did. And it's kind of a fluke that I like it, honestly, because it didn't have to be that way. So I count myself very lucky for those reasons. I'm going to sit here and hesitate because I don't know if I really have any good advice for this, except try things. I mean, I tried data science / machine learning for a little while. I tried looking for jobs in that sphere, and then I realized that I just didn't enjoy it, and it didn't really click with me. So I started looking for jobs in software development instead, and that suits me much better. So if you're thinking of leaving math, don't leave with too confident an idea of exactly what you're going to do. If you do have an idea, and if you don't, you know, there are obviously the first ports of call for most people are machine learning and software development, but also the world's your oyster, right? So this is a version of the fear that everyone encounters when they leave college. Most people, it's just deferred by about 10 years. So, you know, you're definitely not alone in this. It's a really common plight, and it's scary, but it's nothing unusual.
I'm so happy you're saying this. So you mentioned that as a hobby, one can still check out papers. Do you really check out new papers in their field?
Yeah, I do. And honestly, most of the time, I just read the introduction. But
that's also what musicians do.
Yeah, of course. But I probably read the introduction to fewer papers than I did when it was my job. And of course, you know, when I was in math, I would often actually try to read a whole paper because it was actually relevant to my work. And now, you know, I feel liberated from having to understand the details of proofs unless I really, really care about them. But yeah, I mean, it's, I do read the introductions. It doesn't feel like hard work, especially since I'm not doing similar things all day long. It feels like entertainment, really. I mean, it's more intellectual effort than reading a novel or, watching Netflix or something, but it doesn't feel like work.
I see. So I was wondering, did your attitude or relation to math change? So you're saying that you're still in touch with math. Did it somehow, your feeling change?
Well, obviously, it's just become a much smaller part of my life. I don't think the nature of my feelings have changed, but maybe the intensity of my feelings has changed. It's just it's something I'm fond of rather than something that dominates my my experience in many of my days. There are still problems I think about, and because it's not my job, they don't have to be problems that I can actually solve. So, for instance, I don't think I'll ever stop thinking about the Siegel conjecture. I'm really fascinated by the Siegel conjecture. There are proofs out there that I don't understand because they're too computational. I would love for there to be a non-computational proof. I would love to find the paradigm in which the conclusion of the Siegel conjecture is obvious. And I'm optimistic that that paradigm exists. So, sometimes I'll spend some idle time thinking about that, and I haven't made any progress, but it's fun.
Wow.
There's that and maybe a couple of other problems that I think will just never stop fascinating me. And when your career doesn't depend on it, you have less attachment to the idea of succeeding. So you can think about it in kind of a more innocent way.
Yeah, so from what you're saying, it sounds like, okay, you have less time and headspace for math, but also you have less pressure, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe in a sense, you can partly enjoy it more.
Yeah, I mean, and I only do it when I enjoy it. So I really don't spend very much time on it, but when I do, I'm actually enjoying it.
Wow. So I mentioned that I heard from some people who were living math that they would plan to do it as a hobby, and then later they would say that it doesn't work out. There is no time for that. So you somehow managed.
Yeah, like I said, I really don't spend much time on it. And I think you have to relate to it in a way that doesn't require you to spend time. Because if you're trying to do it like it's still your job, then obviously that's going to take way too much time and you can't.
Are there any other ways to relate to it except for like thinking about problems you liked?
Well, you can certainly watch recorded lectures, and I've thought about doing that. I've probably watched a couple in the last couple of years. I guess it hasn't been as rewarding. I have some things on my list, like at some point, I think there are some lectures on condensed mathematics that I wanted to watch at some point by either Peter Scholze or Dustin Clausen, because that's a big development that's really happened since I've left, and it's something that I'd like to catch up on. But I haven't got around to that yet, and maybe I will at some point. Maybe I won't. Actually, another thing I've had the chance to do, speaking of watching lectures, is I always wanted to learn more theoretical physics, because that's also something I find very interesting. Not enough to have wanted to pursue it as a career, but I think it's I can't avoid the fundamental curiosity about how the universe works and what the rules of the universe are, not just in an abstract logical way, but the real physical universe. So since leaving math, I've had more mental space to pursue that, because it feels sufficiently different from my day job that it doesn't really take any of the same energy. So I've been trying to learn the basics of basic physical things like general relativity and quantum field theory that I never really got a chance to get to grips with before.
It's amazing. You leave math and you remain a mathematician.
Well, I still think of myself as a mathematician. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I do.
Sure you are. So I had this question prepared, and while you were talking, I realized this question does not make sense because you clearly are a mathematician, no matter how you perceive it. This is wonderful. So actually, one of the reasons why I react with such a surprise is that many people I know who left math and who used to be my friends, not only left math, but also left their friends in math, including me. So I've never heard of them again, and like they haven't responded messages or emails. So it has been a feeling that sometimes people just disappear.
Right.
And that's scary. So are you in touch with your friends from math, or?
Just a few of them, a few who really became my closest friends. There are definitely a lot more people I would have liked to stay in touch with better, but it's no worse than any previous time I've moved. And I'm just kind of bad at keeping in touch with friends who I'm not living in the same place as anymore. And I don't think this is particularly any worse. Still, everyone who's watching this, I'm sorry that I haven't kept in touch with you better, and please email me.
Great, I'm glad you're saying this. Yeah, I hope you'll get more emails after this. Speaking of apologies, I also have an apology to share in this video. So I'd like to publicly apologize for the fact that I used to subconsciously judge people who were leaving math because I used to think they didn't try hard enough to stay. And now I've realized that was a wrong perspective, and I'm sorry for lacking understanding for different reasons why people leave math. And okay, so I try not to think like that anymore, but my apologies to those who felt that I felt this way. And so I wonder, did you feel any judgment from your peers or colleagues?
No, and I don't think, I don't think anyone who judged me in that way would have expressed it. I don't think I would have felt it, honestly, if anyone felt like that. But I also, it's a matter of maturity, right? You say you used to feel that way. Maybe that was when you were in grad school or something. It's easy to feel that way when it's relatively easy and you're coming up through the system. It's generally when you're looking at a person or a group of people who are in a different place generationally, or in a different life stage from you, it's easy to make assumptions about them and the pressures and the incentives that shape the decisions they make. So, I absolutely don't judge anyone for making those assumptions. It happens all the time in all parts of society that people make assumptions like that and make judgments like that.
Yeah, you sound much more mature. Can I make an assumption that at your age, I will also get your level of maturity? That would be nice. You don't think there is a stigma in academia that like living is a failure and stuff like that?
There's definitely a stigma. And I don't know how the people who make it and get tenure talk about the people who dropped out along the way. I think, I assume that they have empathy most of the time because they're but for the grace of God, and I think they know that. But obviously, once you're out of it, at any time, you can't hear what people are saying about you behind closed doors. And once you're out of it, you're even less likely to overhear. So who knows? But I'd like to operate on the assumption that people are nice and that, you know, no one comes out of it unscathed, you know, with very few exceptions. Even the people who make it to the top have some really tough experiences in the system. So I think that probably breeds empathy as well.
I see. Do you think there is anything we as a math community could do to improve this situation with tough experiences and such?
I mean, I think you would have to rethink the entire model of academia. You know, no one designed it like this. Universities started 800 years ago as basically religious training centers, and one thing led to another, and here we are on mathsjobs.org. You know, it's really path dependent, and the way things have ended up is just really quirky. But I don't know if I had the chance to design the system from scratch. I don't know how I would do it. I would obviously put a lot more money into the system. And I think the less scarcity there is, the nicer a place academia will be. I think that is something that most people would probably agree on. The more resources there are, the more money, basically, the more jobs. I think one thing which might loosen things up is if some level of remote work and remote learning sticks around after the pandemic. I think that there isn't a hugely compelling reason for people to live in the place that they teach, especially if their teaching is mostly done via lectures, which are pretty easy to record. And you don't lose much. You don't lose a whole lot by watching a lecture compared to being in a lecture. Office hours are something else, and I think you do lose something there. But you know, all of the rest, all the research side, the collaboration, and a lot of that already is done remotely because people aren't in the same place. So I think, you know, maybe that's going to make things a little easier to people because people might have a little more freedom to choose where they live in the future. I think, speaking of that, if I were designing the system from scratch, I would definitely decouple research from teaching, because I would try to find a way to do that because it's bad for everyone. The system produces, at research institutions, a lot of people who are teaching because they have to, not because they're interested in teaching. And you know, a lot of those people like teaching. Some of them don't like teaching. Some of them are really good at it. Some of them are bad at it. Very few of them are actually trained to teach. You know, the weirder thing to me is that the best research institutions are considered the best places to go as an undergrad. And that doesn't make sense to me because the incentives are completely misaligned there. You don't want to learn the basics of your field from the people who are the best at research. There's absolutely no reason those are the people who'd be best at teaching the basics of the field. And yet here we are. That's how it is. You know, the best undergraduate education is supposedly at Harvard or any other elite research institution, and that shows no sign of changing. Even though I suspect that if you lived in a fantasy world where there was some objective way to measure quality of teaching, quality of learning, that would turn out not to be the case. So that's, yeah, and you know, if you could uncouple those things, then demand for research would not be, well, there is no demand for research. So positions in research would not be a secondary effect of the demand for teaching. You would have to find some other way to fund research, or, you know, for researchers to justify their existence, and I'm not sure what that would be. So I'm rambling. I don't actually have any good ideas on how to redesign the academic system from whole cloth, but I think teaching and research decoupled would be one of my first criteria.
Actually, you mentioned that researchers don't get training in teaching, and I just remembered that this pandemic, first semester of pandemic, so like the spring term, was the fourth term when I was teaching exercise sessions in Germany. And so I was doing it online first time. And as always, I was feeling very unconfident at my teaching, which is my general problem with math, but okay. In particular, after a while, I was complaining to one of my collaborators that I'm not sure I'm doing a good job as a teacher. And he suggested to join the Zoom session, to go once to see like if it's really as bad as I tell, because I always exaggerate. So he went there and he said, oh, actually, what you're doing as a teacher is not what you're supposed to be doing. And he gave me some really good advice. And then I was completely shocked because I realized that it's my fourth semester of teaching and no one has ever told me anything about how teaching is supposed to be. Like right. I arrived to Germany, I did not get training in Germany, I did not study there as a student. In Russia, it was completely different. So I had no experience as a student, and then I just became a teacher and no one told me anything of it. And then until I got this super helpful advice, I didn't even realize that, oh, actually they could have, made like a workshop or something for people arriving from abroad about, German education system and what is expected from teachers.
Yeah, I mean, almost all the time you're expected to pick up this stuff by osmosis. And I had, I think when I was at MIT, I had a one-day teaching seminar once. And that was, that was something, and I'm sure it helped me, but it was one day.
That's one day more than you get in at least 3 German universities where I was.
Right.
And since then, I'm very concerned on why don't universities like organize at least that kind of one-day workshop.
Right.
So I agree with you about the importance of teaching. I'm not sure how research would be funded if it were separated.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a matter of convenience, but it has some weird effects.
Yeah, and I guess the people who in the system, both students and the researchers suffer from this when they don't like teaching. So
exactly.
Did you enjoy teaching?
Sometimes. I never really enjoyed lecturing. I had a few courses that I taught where I had some students who would come to my office hours who are fun to talk to, and who, who are interested in learning. So, this is about to be a cliche, but if you have students who come to you, and it doesn't matter what level they are or how prepared they are, but if they come to you with questions and with a genuine desire to learn, then that can't help but be fun. There's really an energy there, which I think just feels like how teaching should be. And lecturing feels very sterile in comparison. Again, maybe with more remote lecturing, I think it's very wasteful that Calculus 1 is, just talking about the American system, Calculus 1 will be lectured in parallel by 3 different lecturers every semester, all giving, in a lot of cases, near identical lectures. That seems very wasteful to me. Every 10 years, you should find the person who is best at lecturing Calculus 1 and have them record the lectures. And then, each semester, people can do office hours and other kinds of one-on-one and small group teaching. And the time and energy which was spent on lecturing could be spent on more personalized teaching instead.
Yeah, I agree. I don't understand why the system is like that. I heard that the argument that it's better for the students to come in the audience where there is some live person moving the chalk along the blackboard, but I'm not sure the difference is such big that it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a good heuristic here is if it was the other way, would you want to go back? You know, if we had a culture of watching video lectures that were recorded once every 5 or 10 years, and someone came to you with a proposal to take everyone's time and energy to lecture the course every semester, potentially several times in parallel instead, you know, how seriously would you take that proposal?
It sounds insane.
Right.
Oh man. I see. So I'm curious. So, what are the most surprising things about the world outside academia?
So it's a little bit of a weird question for me because I've only had one job since leaving academia, and it's starting to be a little bit of an unusual situation because usually in tech, people job hop about every couple of years. But you know, I've changed hats in the company I work at once or twice, and it's still new and interesting enough in a lot of ways for me to want to continue there. So you know, I'm not going to go into that much detail about my current job. I think something that surprised me early on is I was expecting kind of a disciplined environment where, especially before the pandemic, when I was going into work in person most days, you know, when I started, I was expecting someone to be monitoring whether I was at my desk or whether I was looking productive. And of course, you know, there are very many jobs at very many companies which are exactly like that. But in tech, there's a culture of not having that kind of disciplinarian atmosphere, which I think is really nice. And on the whole, good for productivity, which is, you know, a claim that a lot of people would make, but there are also people who are personally advantaged by it in other ways. So, yeah, I think that was something that surprised me. You know, no one was checking up on me.
Nice. Do you feel more or less or same productive when you do other things than that?
I feel much more productive. So this is, you know, something else that started getting me down in my last year or two of academia. I would sit down and I would try to think about a research problem. And a lot of the time I would just feel stuck and I wasn't getting anywhere. And there's only a certain amount of time you can sit there and metaphorically hit your head against a wall before you run out of energy to do that because it's taxing hitting your head against a wall. So then you stop, you take a break, and then you can't bring yourself to go back to the problem, and then you start blaming yourself because, you know, how can I not even have the willpower to do this thing, which is my job? And it can become quite a negative spiral. So yeah, I feel probably, oh, of course, the thing I'm producing is very different. But in terms of time spent feeling like I'm doing something, I'm probably an order of magnitude more productive than when I was in math, which is, you know, and that's just the nature of the beast. You know, research is really hard.
Thank you, I noticed.
Yeah. And it's harder than almost anything in the world that you could do for a living. So, you know, I think my advice to anyone who's still in research is be kind to yourself. And if you're not feeling productive, don't blame yourself. It's not because you're lazy. It's just because you're trying to do this incredibly hard thing.
Thank you for understanding. That's kind of you to say. Yeah, it's very hard not to blame yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. So, well, people should get from this that, yeah, you can, trade some intellectual joy or intellectual pain for feeling more productive, which is really something I think many people miss.
Yeah, there's definitely a trade-off there, and part of the trade-off is that when the productive feeling is harder to get to, it can feel more satisfying. But that might be true to different degrees or not at all for different people, and it's a trade-off to be aware of between research and other things.
So what else do you get when you research? Besides clearly you don't have to move and you can decide where to live and you earn more money. These are like, let's say, obvious things, and you have free evenings and maybe weekends even. But okay, which less obvious things do you get?
More of a feeling of security, absolutely. In academia, I continually felt, once I left grad school, I continually felt, I was lucky to get this job, and after this job, I may not get another one. And depending on your field, again, things might be different, but in software especially, I am absolutely sure that if I left my current job, I could find another job within a reasonable amount of time. It would be with a comparable salary and a comparable lifestyle, and I would probably not have to move. So that feeling of security is really hard to overvalue. It's if you want to make plans for more than a year or two in the future, it's something that's really, really nice to have. I think you named a lot of the other stuff. Let me stop trying to say things about the advantages of working in industry. I think we've covered it.
I haven't heard before from other people the perspective about being productive. I think that's actually very important. So you have said new things here, don't worry. I have one more question about the difference. Maybe there is no difference, but I was curious, are social interactions different within academia and industry?
So in academia, there's really the strong bond of feeling like you're a group of people who've been selected for having something in common. And there's kind of a ready-made bond there that I found especially in grad school. Less so as a postdoc, but being a postdoc is a lot more socially isolated than being in grad school anyway. So it's, and also the fact that I was younger, so I'm not really comparing like with like. I really felt that when I started grad school, I was thrown into a group of people with whom I had a lot of shared values and a lot of shared background. I think some people feel that way about their workplaces. I think that's a little weird, but I'm not going to judge it. I think, you're also asking me this just after a pandemic when I didn't really have any social interaction at all, right? So I think my coworkers, I don't feel like I have a ready-made social bond with my coworkers the way I did when I was in grad school, and maybe even a little as a postdoc. But that's fine. Work is work. You have to go and seek out your friends, which can be hard, especially if you've just moved to a new place.
Yeah, seeking new friends is, I think, a painful topic for people who move every other year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard. It's even harder when there's a pandemic.
I mean, even without pandemic, I plan to start applying for jobs in the fall. And the thing I feel the most sad about is that I found friends in Zurich. I don't want to leave them.
Yeah, I know that feeling very well. You know, everywhere that I moved and then left.
Yeah. So are there any, I mean, besides the actual technical skills, but are there any new general skills that you acquired when you changed the job?
Yeah, I would say so. And it's a little hard to articulate. But one skill that's particularly useful in software is the skill of collaboratively planning something. The question of, we're going to make this thing, what do we want it to be? How do we want it to behave? What are the edge cases it might run into? I think that is a transferable skill. It's a skill that is definitely everywhere in software development, but I think a lot of other disciplines, particularly engineering style disciplines, you experience the same thing.
Is it hard to switch from thinking on your own to team thinking? Like how does it happen?
Well, it's really a question of division of labor. So when you're planning the thing, you're also planning who is going to make which parts of the thing. And then hopefully you have, if the management is good and the planning is good, you have something that you can work on that's well-defined, more or less on your own. And the way you do it isn't going to affect how other people do their jobs.
Uh-huh. So the skill you were talking about was about like coming up with a dream together?
No, I mean, it's not a dream. I mean, it's something concrete. So, you know, a feature in an app, we want to change how we do login. This is how we want the login screen to look. But oh, what does it happen if you press button X under condition Y? Oh, well, then we'll have to show screen C. Where is the data going to be stored? Those kinds of conversations. And it's, you know, it's somewhat similar to some conversations you have during mathematical collaborations, but it's a lot more structured. Because there's the sense that everyone has to go away with a good idea of what their individual part is and how they're going to do it, and come back having done it.
I see. So what do you actually like the most about your job?
Yeah, what do I like the most about it? The feeling of productivity that we were talking about earlier is a really big plus. So another way of saying that is I like the fact that I can do it. I like the fact that I get to use programming languages which are to my taste and even somewhat compatible with a mathematical mindset, or at least a categorical mindset, which is kind of a mindset which is shared between math and computer science to some extent. I like the fact that I work at a company that respects the boundary between work and life.
I see.
And I like the fact that I'm not bored. There's always something to do, and it's not something identical to the thing I was doing yesterday.
Oh, that's super important. This is what I was afraid to ask. So I imagined maybe that's a very naive and wrong picture, that like a job in industry is there's a learning curve where in the first few months you have to learn a lot, and then you kind of have learned, and then you just do the thing you've learned. But you're saying it's not like that?
Well, it is like that. But I think doing the thing you learned is not as repetitive as it might sound. You know, it's not like I learned to be a carpenter and then I spend all day building identical tables. Because the beauty of software is you only have to make it once and then it can be copied freely. So yeah, it really is always something different. If you didn't like programming, then you might find it boring and repetitive, but I like it well enough that it doesn't.
I wonder, maybe that's a bad question, but let me phrase it anyway. Would you have any advice to the minority of people in math who like math and dislike programming, finance, machine learning, and all the other popular directions to go to?
I think the only advice I could give is try to find the things that you do like. Or at least try to find a thing that you feel like you could learn to like, something that you don't find immediately off-putting, you know. Because the learning curve isn't just learning to do a thing, it's learning to enjoy a thing.
Wow. Can you learn to enjoy something? I thought it usually goes like down, no?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think, you know, if it's something that you hate, then of course not. And you can probably learn to be good at something you hate and you still hate it. But if it's something that seems somewhat interesting, but I don't know, then by getting to know it, you can form a bond. It's like a person. And I think that's truer than a lot of people think.
Wow. Somehow, I hardly hear from people saying that they get to enjoy math more and more with years.
Well, that again, I think is just because it's so hard.
Oh. I've been wondering, I think there is yet another difficulty of academia, which is that if you're unsure if you want to stay in academia, it's very hard, as I imagine, to quit for some time and go make an internship, do something else, and then decide if you want to stay. Somehow academia, I feel, is not designed for this kind of considerations. So do you have any advice or idea of what people could do if they are unsure if they want to stay?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a big problem. And I think it's just an effect of how incredibly competitive the field is. If you have a culture of regarding it as suspicious that someone took a year off to do an internship in industry, then first, that culture is going to be very difficult to shift. And second, it doesn't harm the sustainability of the field, because if you exclude those candidates, there are so many other people to pick from. So screening out those people doesn't negatively affect the sustainability of the field as a whole, because you know, even if you screen out those people, you'll have a lot of other candidates to choose from, just because jobs are just so oversubscribed. So I think, you know, academia would probably be a lot healthier if people could leave and come back. I don't think that you're going to be seriously behind if you leave for even 2 or 3 years. It doesn't move that fast. You can read a few papers to catch up when you get back, you know. So I think that absolutely would be an improvement to the culture. I have no idea how to make that happen.
You're speaking about 2 or 3 years, and I had much humbler hopes that it would be okay to leave for 3 months to like make a short internship. But I think even that, like during PhD, is hard to arrange with your advisor.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't really know why that's something that's looked down upon. You know, maybe there's some kind of culture of purity, but I don't know how to change it.
Yeah. That's hard. Because I've met many PhD students who in the first or second year are unsure if that's the right thing for them, and then they don't want to spend several years on doing this thing which they're unsure. And such a natural thing would be to say, go make a short internship. But
yeah, no, it would. And you know, it's normal. It's normal, even common, to do internships during undergrad, but somehow, you know, when you start grad school, you're expected to have your decisions graven in stone.
Okay. Is there something you wish you knew about world outside math before leaving academia?
Well, I'd like to say that I wish I knew that I wouldn't have too much trouble finding a job, but again, I mean, I might have been very lucky, and it might have been much harder for me in a different world. So I don't know whether I can really say that. I don't know if it's something I know. I wish I knew with confidence that having a job can be pleasant. It doesn't have to be, like I was saying before, a disciplinarian situation where someone is always checking up on you. It can be, you know, a sustainable arrangement where you're trusted to produce something that you're able to produce. So I think this is something that worried me a lot while I was looking for jobs. You know, I obviously needed a job, but also would having a job make me miserable, a job outside academia, because I had only known one lifestyle, and you know, my closest reference point for what I imagined to be a typical industry job was, I guess, like high school. That was the closest thing I'd experienced, and it's actually very different. But it's you know, I imagined a much more restrictive and a much less trusting atmosphere.
I'm surprised that you said you believed you would surely become tenured, but then also you were concerned that, like, you didn't believe that you would easily find a job, whereas there are so many jobs outside academia and so little jobs in academia. This is not as rational as the rest of the things you're saying.
Well, there's a significant time difference between those two things, right? You know, my confidence that I would follow the academic path definitely peaked in undergrad and grad school, and then it was only a few years after that that I was seriously thinking about industry jobs, and I didn't have as optimistic of an outlook on the world. So
it sounds like while we struggle with mathjobs.org, we imagine that world outside also has as little to offer.
Yeah, I think it's just hard to imagine what you don't have any direct experience with, and you don't know what the painful things are, and what the nice things are.
I see. Okay, so let me ask you for the end. What's your last advice for young mathematicians who feel insecure and unsure if they will get a job and what to, I mean, you know, this feeling.
Apart from everything I've already said, I think I've hit all the high points, but absolutely don't feel ashamed if you're considering leaving math. It's not something to be ashamed of. The world is much bigger than academia, and people do this all the time. This is also something I already said, but I'm going to reiterate. It is not unusual to be out there in the world looking for a job and not knowing exactly what you want to do. Having a path in mind that that is kind of that provides you with a sense of certainty is really a luxury, and it's a luxury that the overwhelming majority of people don't have, and it's okay to live without it. If you can leave one path of certainty and find another one, like decide you want to become CEO of a ball bearing manufacturing company and attain the biggest market share in the world of ball bearing manufacture, then that's great. Like, go do that, but that is absolutely not something that's necessary to live your life.